Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where today Ilia Kolochenko at ImmuniWeb is going to be sharing his views on how the legal and tech worlds are colliding. They're based in Switzerland, and he has studied 2 masters in legal studies in the US and has some unique observations on the continuously evolving differences between European legislation, including things like GDPR compliance, and the varying laws across the world. And if you're hearing about ImmuniWeb for the first time, it's essentially a global application security company operating in over 50 countries. And most of their companies come from regulated industries. So we're talking banking, healthcare and e-commerce, etc. And it's their AI platform that leverages AI and machine learning technology for acceleration and intelligent automation of attack surface management and dark web monitoring. And as far as I'm aware, they're the only company that offers contractual zero false positives SLA with a money-back guarantee. But I wanted to find out all about that and much more. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Switzerland, where we're going to dive headfirst into the topic right now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure, Neil. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Ilia. I'm Chief Architect at ImmuniWeb. So ImmuniWeb is a global application security company operating in over 50 countries. And in a nutshell, we help our clientele to simplify, to accelerate, and to cut costs of their application security programs, including application security testing, remediation, defense, and compliance. And my daily job is to lead our tech teams, including security analysts, penetration testers, software engineers, and data scientists. I enjoy talking to our customers and partners to continuously learn how we can improve our offering, what are the new features they would like to see at ImmuniWeb, and how we can help them. And probably I would say this is my most favorite exercise at ImmuniWeb today.
Love that. And there's so much I'm excited to talk with you about today and explore the kind of work that you're doing. But one of the places I wanted to start at is trying to set the scene here. And if you sell web-based software for a living and ship code that references an unregistered domain name, obviously you're going to be asking for trouble. But what about when the same mistake is made by a Fortune 500 company? And the reason I make that reference there is that was the case for a company called Fiserv, a $15 billion firm that provides online banking software and other technology solutions to thousands of financial institutions which have been using an unclaimed domain. But for anyone that missed that recent story, can I ask that you set the scene and offer an overview of what happened there?
Well, I think that in 2021, the landscape of information technology, I would say in general, not just our external attack surface, but information technology is really complex. We have, a convoluted intricacy of different SaaS solutions, coming from different providers and vendors. We're talking about surging supply chain attacks. And it is really complex to keep everything under control. So I would say that from a practical view, when a large company make a mistake, it can be understandable. I'm not trying to justify this, but when you have such a huge, variety of different systems, technologies, teams, suppliers, and different, stack of new and outdated technologies that have to coexist. Because what we frequently observe that clients have innovative products and solutions. They are moving everything to cloud, but at the same time, they have to maintain legacy applications because no one wants to be accountable to take this specific application out of production, because no one wants to be, the person who crashed it. So it is a complicated task that requires a lot of efforts and sometimes even, chance, because it is virtually impossible to ensure that 100% of possible mistakes and pitfalls are covered, because we have known unknowns and we have unknown unknowns. So it's a challenge. And I would say when there is one or two mistakes committed even by the largest financial institutions, healthcare organizations who probably cannot afford same amount of spending, but who should probably follow in a higher degree of care, and even by the government, I would say this is something that unfortunately we should expect in the future, and probably cybersecurity and general technology insurances will help, because we are all human, we all make some mistakes, and probably there is no system that is sophisticated enough that is completely invulnerable and perfectly configured, and all third-party components and frameworks are likewise secure. So I think hedging these risks with cyber insurance can be a sound avenue to prevent incidents when human error or just extreme complexity of a specific technology inevitably create an incident.
So what was your key takeaway from that story, where the worlds of legal and technology collided? And also, how has GDPR compliance, how have you seen that affect the security industry too?
Oh, that's probably my favorite question. I think it resembles to PCI DSS at 2007, 2008, when it was just, probably the first emerging, cybersecurity standard. Of course, it was, I would say, easier to comply with it compared to PCI DSS 3.2.1 and the upcoming 4.0. But what I observed almost 13 years ago, it was that many people were uncertain how to comply with PCI DSS. Many companies were concerned how to comply on paper, looking, for a beautiful certificate or document saying, we're compliant. And we had a lot of, buzzword about, PCI DSS and compliance, though, compared to GDPR, PCI DSS was a very narrow standard, right? And I would probably say I had a sort of, an impression of deja vu with GDPR, that we had a lot of uncertainty on the market. For example, we have a lot of articles saying that you may have a highest penalty going up to 4% of global turnover or 20 million euros. That is correct, but this is not the categorical fine or absolute fine we can have, because, for example, for data security incidents, it is up to 2% and up to 10 million euros penalties. Likewise, EU member states, they are authorized to make their national law and to criminalize, deliberate misappropriation or mishandling of personal data. So few people know that in countries like Austria or France, some, I would say, flagrant violations of, personal information, is appropriations or even other things can be criminally punished. And we have a lot of uncertainty, though, GDPR came in force in 2018. And still we have a lot of clients who are uncertain, at least for certain aspects and details, how exactly they can comply. And especially, I would say, all this is exacerbated by the fact that GDPR is continuously evolving, as we saw with Schrems 2 decision that, practically speaking, invalidated, frictionless data exchange with the United States. we have some hot fixes like standard contract clauses, but again, we have a lot of uncertainty whether in the United States we'll have a new federal law that will provide comprehensive, privacy and personal data protection across the country. Well, it's something that we're talking about since years, and I hope that administration of Joe Biden will have resources and time to finally, enact federal law, but this is uncertain as well. So I would say compliance became extremely complicated, time-consuming, and expensive. And what is probably the most challenging, even for legal professionals and data protection officers, is this convoluted patchwork. Because, for example, in the United States, you have to keep in mind different federal laws. You have to keep in mind state laws. If you do business with the European Union or Brazil or now South Africa, you must also comply with their data protection laws. So it is becoming an arduous, task to ensure that you comply with this wide spectrum of mushrooming laws and regulations.
I love that. And it does seem to be a real big trend that we're seeing engulf the entire world at the moment. So I'm curious, how have you seen the continuously evolving differences between, let's say, European legislation that affects ourselves and GDPR compliance and the varying laws in each of the 50 US states too? Because it seems that they're following and creating their own version of this, aren't they?
Well, I'd say that European GDPR certainly serves an example to most other jurisdictions and countries. For example, in Singapore, they, I would say, largely follow GDPR. We have similar trends, in Brazil and South Africa. In California, we have, I would say, similarities with GDPR. I would probably disagree that CCPA and the upcoming enhancement with CPRA will make California will turn CCPA into Californian GDPR, because it provides some exceptions, and exemptions for small businesses. With GDPR, practically speaking, everyone is covered. Okay, so I would say it's not that strict as the GDPR, but when we read, different discussions related to newly enacted legislation around the globe, we see that everyone wants to benchmark with GDPR how compatible, how comparable their legislation is, with GDPR. And I think that we see a general convergence, to GDPR. And I hope that if one day in the United States there is a law that will bring, federal data protection and privacy regulation, it will largely be, I would probably say, inspired or compatible with GDPR. So we can finally see the European Commission granting adequacy status to the United States. So I think probably in a decade from now, we will have GDPR compliant or similar to GDPR legislation. We will, of course, have some local, national, details. For example, under CCPA, you must have a conspicuously visible link on your website saying, do not sell my data. That with the upcoming enhancement in 2023 will become do not sell or share my data. This is not present in GDPR or in many other national laws, but it's I would say, relatively small feature that is not of a strategic importance, and it's something that we can comply with. But the underlying philosophy, to value privacy to consider, personal data as someone's property. So only he or she can decide how to store, how to process, how to share. I think this is definitely a good trend because people become controllers, become real owners of their personal data. They don't need to worry about, who will contact me, because my personal data was sold and resold and shared. However, tricky thing here is that we see a lot of large tech companies who try to put some, I would say, tricky clauses into their privacy policies that you are supposed to carefully read and agree and accept. And many people, what they do, of course, they will not read through 25 pages of privacy policy, and they just accept. And frequently, as a matter of law, they give their consent. However, we see a trend that now more and more, legislators and regulators, they request, I would say, transparent and explicit consent. So you cannot just hide, a paragraph or phrase in a 25 pages privacy policy or terms of service. And what we see as a trend that more and more regulatory agencies, they suggest, making, step-by-step privacy notice. So, for example, when you upload your photo, you will have specific privacy disclaimer saying that your photo will be visible, we'll send it to a third party. So it makes privacy more understandable and privacy policies become easily consumable. And I think this is how the future will be. For example, in California, I think they pioneered by expressly restricting usage of so-called dark patterns, when by using, user interface features or functionalities, you slow down, hinder, or prevent users from saying, no, I disagree. Or when you just have, big green button saying, I agree. And if you disagree, you have to scroll down like 20 pages below to find a small button saying, I disagree. And you have to click, yes, I do confirm that I disagree. And yes, I finally reconfirm that I finally disagree. So California expressly prohibited dark patterns. And I think this trend will be followed everywhere. And another second thing, to be aware of, that privacy legislation is not a silver bullet, and practically speaking is no protection at all against cyber criminals, because some people perceive that, with GDPR, cyber criminals will be, let's say, less aggressive, or cybercrime will fall down. I would say we may have such an outcome because organizations will start caring about your privacy. They'll start caring about data security. And this will make, I would say, cybercrime longer and costlier, and probably it will slow down their growth. However, what is important to consider is that all data protection, privacy legislation is not comparable to anti-hacking laws that criminalize, intrusions into computer systems, data theft. So I would probably keep in mind that if we want to ensure that cyber crime will be prosecuted, not just, careless or negligent companies who, lose your data or who underprotect your data, but if we also want to deter, if we want to slow down cybercrime, we probably also need to revise our existing anti-hacking legislation, because in many countries it's still, I would say, comparatively soft. And when we see cyber criminals being sent to jail for 6 months, compared to street crime, when you steal the same amount of money in a, let's say, in a steroid crime, you'll probably spend 6 years in jail. Of course, new generations, they say, okay, I don't want to be a gangster, but I'll be a hacker, because the penalties are much smaller. And it's also a question of, collaboration, because I think that the key to success in prosecuting cybercrime is to ensure collaboration across the globe. Of course, with some countries it will be virtually impossible, but I think even the European Union and the United States, they have a lot of potential, to facilitate while preserving decent privacy. They still have capacity to increase collaboration in terms of joint prosecution, data exchange, because frequently, I would say fairly complex topics of international law and jurisdiction and cross prosecution in different countries, they hinder and slow down investigation, and cyber criminals enjoy impunity.
And we will have people listening all over the world. And I do know in particular, Asia Pacific and that entire region is thriving right now too. So I'm curious, how does what we're talking about here compare with the legal practices in places such as Singapore and right across Asia?
Well, I think that it really depends on the jurisdiction. For example, in Singapore and Hong Kong, we have I would say fairly strict penalties for certain type of cybercrime offense. However, I don't have numbers, and it would probably be interesting to delve into statistics, how many cyber crimes have been cleared. But I guess that regardless, specific anti-hacking legislation, abstracted, from international collaboration, the outcomes, how many cyber criminals will end up in jail, will be not that impressive. And again, probably, collaboration with different countries across the globe by a central agency or, by different central agencies, for example, Europol, can really make efficiency and effectiveness of this cyber legislation more efficient, because now what cyber criminals probably observe that very few countries can really prosecute international cybercrime, and they perceive that even if there are some tough laws and legislation regime where you can end up in jail for a decade, you cannot really expect this to happen, because you're located in a foreign country that never collaborate or collaborate with a lot of hesitance, and you're feeling comfortable, especially with cryptocurrencies and infrastructure, when you can purchase like anonymous VPNs and make a chained structure of different proxies and VPNs, and also adding compromised systems in the middle to make you technically untraceable, receiving payments in Bitcoin, for example. They enjoy technical impunity because they know that it's extremely expensive and time-consuming to uncover who they are. And even, once their identity is known, and I think many federal and national authorities, both in the United States and in many European countries, they do great work, by prosecuting and investigating complicated, international cyber crime. It is still a challenge, to prosecute someone who is located in a foreign country, who flatly refused to cooperate, saying, no, will not, extradite this specific person. He's our citizen, and he or she can stand a trial in our country that will, of course, never happen.
And what do you think about the rise in cybersecurity issues in everything from legal and a technical point of view for individuals and businesses? If you put all that into one big pot, what do you think about the rise there?
Well, I think cybersecurity will become essential for businesses around the globe. And probably good trends that I observe is that people start caring, about their privacy. They start, selecting vendors, and even when they purchase online goods of nominal value, or for example, when they're ordering pizza, they will probably prefer, a restaurant that has a strong, or at least, let's say, adequate protection of your credit card number, of your personal data. So I would say cybersecurity and privacy becomes attractive differentiator on the global landscape. And I think probably in the next 2-3 years, we'll see that many companies will start perceiving cybersecurity not as an arduous and boring, and even, I'd say, irritating exercise that they have to perform annually, but they will rather perceive it as an ongoing process that bolsters your competitiveness, that brings value to your customers, that your customers recognize this value, that they appreciate this value, and that will eventually drive up your sales, your revenues. And I think cybersecurity will become a strong, business enabler. And I think this is good because probably a decade ago, people didn't really care about their security, and how secure your supplier was probably secondary question, to put it mildly. While today we observe that in many specific industries, how secure you are, how well you can protect the data that your clients entrust you, is becoming essential. And I think it's a good trend that will make our economy, that will make, global politics, collaboration, it will make it sustainable, and it will bring value, for individuals and for businesses around the globe.
I completely agree with you there. And can I also ask that you tell me a little bit more about the innovations of attackers in response to businesses implementing these different security tech and different practices? And do you think we'll end up with good AI versus bad AI, or where do you see it heading?
Well, sadly, we don't really need any, I would say, substantial innovation today to conduct large-scale ransomware campaigns. For example, this is actually why we see a surge, I would say, continuously growing spike of ransomware attacks, because they are very cheap to organize. You don't really need any technical skills. You can participate in ransomware as a service business, or you can purchase ready-to-use malware. You can purchase ready-to-hire spam botnets. So there is a lot of offering on the so-called dark web, or however we call it. And practically speaking, even a teenager with, let's say, modest technical skills can become a professional ransomware hacker, and get a solid and stable income, virtually without having any concerns about his or her own security, because with payments in cryptocurrencies, it's challenging and expensive, and sometimes technically impossible to trace it back. Okay, now we have a lot of startups, who start offering services that under certain conditions and circumstances can attribute, certain transactions in Bitcoin to some people, but this is not yet very well, let's say, developed. And another thing is that probably, law enforcement agencies, they have other priorities than investigating, small ransomware attacks, when small and medium businesses lose several thousands of dollars. That's not their, I would say, big concern, because they have so many large-scale intrusions targeting governments, critical infrastructure. So, and talking about innovation, I'd probably say I didn't observe any substantial or material innovation in the cybercrime industry. Yes, we we obviously observe growing usage of machine learning, but mostly to accelerate, or to optimize certain existing processes. Okay, so for example, you can better profile your victims. You can ensure that, for example, phishing landing pages, when your victims go to a specific website, it will be, adjusted for your victim or for a specific phishing campaign that you have. So you can certainly attain better efficiency and effectiveness, but we are not talking about something that is like revolutionary. And probably we will not see any major, I would say, substantial innovation on the cybercrime market. Perhaps, we can see that during the pandemic, what is a new, I would say, relatively new trend is that cyber criminals, they now observe that many organizations and companies, they start deploying centralized identity management systems, anomaly detection systems, and many other good and fairly powerful security processes and controls, if properly implemented and configured. And what cyber criminals do, for example, when they harvest, previously stolen credentials on the dark web coming from your employees, suppliers, they will not try to log in directly to your web applications, for example, but they'll try to go to Slack and they will try to see whether your engineers are discussing any, security concerns. Probably they are copy pasting source code, probably with logins and passwords from externally accessible databases, for example. And what we observe these days that frequently cyber criminals will try to target your suppliers, your third parties, different SaaS platforms, because despite existing integrations, functionalities like implementing two-factor authentications there, very few companies are doing this today. So for cyber criminals, it's like paradise, because they know that they can go to dark web, purchase or download or exchange all previously stolen logins and passwords from your team, and then try to reuse it without generating noise against different systems that you do not manage, that you do not control. And frequently they can get everything they want from third parties without even leaving a trace in your incident logs, or without creating any movements that can trigger any internal alert in your company. So I would say it's not really innovative, targeting third parties, but I think this is a growing trend, and supply chain attacks now becoming a hot topic. But what is the good news that we see that governments and companies all over the world now, they start taking, supply chain attacks seriously, and they start implementing different processes like, third-party risk management program, that are designed to mitigate, third-party risks, to make sure that your vendors are scorecarded, according to their, let's say, potential threats. For example, what type of data they process, what type of privileged access they have. So we see certain improvements, but probably, one of the relatively new trends in 2021 will be, surging and silent attacks on your trusted third parties.
And you've done a fantastic job there of setting the scene and talking about the landscape and where we are now. But if we were to look to the future, is there anything that makes you hopeful about where we're heading? And also, what kind of role do you see ImmuniWeb playing in that future? Well,
probably starting with the first question. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think we will invent a magic solution. So I don't think that we'll have a silver bullet, because we'll still have, I would say, some foundational challenges like living in the world of ancient, archaic technologies that have to coexist with modern, highly innovative technologies, processes, and systems. And we cannot do much about this because, it's all about economy. When organizations cannot afford, replacing all outdated devices or servers or systems or software, they will not do this unless government provides them with money, to upgrade and to update all outdated software and hardware. But I don't think this will ever happen, especially after the pandemic. We have a lot of challenges around the globe. So I think we will have to continue our way towards, incremental improvement, towards, enhancement of different security controls. What is probably a good trend that I observe, that more and more people and organizations, they start not just talking, but they start implementing what we call risk-based and threat-aware approach to cybersecurity, when we don't just, blindly invest a lot of money, or when we don't just, perform something here and there, making a sort of patchwork without any centralized strategy. But I personally see a lot of companies and a lot of cybersecurity professionals who start thinking, globally, and who try to make a centralized, long-term cybersecurity strategy and program, not just like our KPIs for the next 6 months. And what happened afterwards, nobody knows. But we start, seeing companies and organizations who are led by talented individuals who really think about, what happens in 3 years from now. How can we modernize our technology? How can we modernize our software? How we can modernize our processes related, for example, to remote work, working from home, IoT devices. So they really start planning, and this helps because I believe that most of the security incidents that we observe today, and probably that we observed during the last decade, were mainly stemming from I would say poor managerial practices, not really technology issues, because we have a myriad of great cybersecurity solutions and companies who provide highly efficient, tenable, resilient software solutions and services. It's rather about how to combine them, how to manage them, how to structure them in such a way that everything will be covered, all your assets will be visible, and you will implement adequate security controls, sufficient and proportional to identified risks and threats. Talking about ImmuniWeb, we try to contribute into this trend in different ways. Probably one of the most visible from the outside is our community edition. So we provide several free online tests that today have over 100,000 daily tests. Okay, and anyone, regardless of his or her geographical location, technical skills, whatsoever, can verify, how secure or insecure a specific website is. Can scan a mobile application for OWASP Mobile Top 10 risks. Can check, for existing, phishing websites, domain squatting, and many other things. So in a nutshell, Community Edition provide you with a free access to foundational application security, with a general overview of your organizational exposure on the dark web. So you can see how many data leaks, incidents are currently visible, advertised or publicized on different locations in the dark web. And it is, I would say, our solution, to enable SMEs, to enable startups, to enable small governments who cannot afford, spending on cybersecurity for obvious reasons, to get a free access to foundational cybersecurity, privacy, and compliance. We see a lot of great feedback. People enjoy, and I think it is important. It's like pays salary that is now actively discussed in many different countries, and I think that our community edition is important part, I would say, of what we do by promoting cybersecurity awareness, by enabling anyone, regardless his or her technical skills, to easily test a website, mobile application, to check dark web exposure. So I think this is a big part of the story that we have at ImmuniWeb. And also talking about commercial offering, I would say our ecosystem of our commercial services, we start with illuminating your external attack surface, including your web applications, VPN servers, IoT devices accessible from the internet, cloud storage, your SaaS providers that process or store your data. And we also, enhance this helicopter view with your exposure on the dark web, including phishing campaigns, including indicators of compromise that are currently present, in different threat intelligence feeds, indicating that your asset, for example, cloud node or web server, is sending suspicious requests or sending spam, for example. So we really provide a comprehensive overview to our customers so they can follow a well-informed, data-driven strategy for their application security. And practically speaking, we start when doing business with our customers, we start by providing our clientele with a visibility, with risk-based threat-aware approach, so they can have efficient and technically effective application security testing, remediation, because many clients have questions how to prioritize, because we cannot test everything at once. We cannot fix all of the vulnerabilities at once. So this is where ImmuniWeb serves like your mountain guide, by helping our customers to identify, prioritize, and make sure that their investment into application security will tackle, all the challenges. Nothing will be omitted, forgotten, and what they do is based on a data-driven approach.
Before I let you go, can you remind everyone listening of where they can find Illumini on the internet, or reach out and contact a member of your team? Where can they find you guys?
So sure, it's very simple. So it's ImmuniWeb.com, ImmuniWeb.com. There you can see immediately our community edition on the top level menu. You can immediately start using it without any restrictions. You can also request the demos there, so it's fairly simple and straightforward process. If you'd like to connect over LinkedIn, happy to do so. Please just, send an invitation request saying that you're coming from this podcast, and I will gladly stay in touch with you.
There's so much I've loved about chatting with you today. I'd love to stay in touch with you. Hopefully we can meet at a tech conference in the future in person, but more than anything, just a big thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
All the pleasure is mine, Neil. Thank you for having me here today.
It was so interesting there to hear more about how GDPR compliance has affected the security industry, and also hearing about all the other legislations across the world, and for exploring the world of technology in business and compliance, but also from a very human and legal point of view too. So if that is your world, I'd love to hear more about your experiences. Maybe today's conversation sparked a few ideas in you. And if it did, I'd love to hear from you about that. So please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. Keep those questions and insights coming in, and pictures to come on the show. And I'll join you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. But a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.